This is kind of all over the place. This is gonna be a nightmare to edit. Ugh. Hey, you! If you've read the book but haven't seen the show, I would still recommend not watching this video before you watch the show, because the show is pretty dang good, and I think you'll enjoy it even knowing some of the plot points. So stop watching this video, go watch the show, come back here, because that's very important to me, I need views, and, yeah. Hi! It's been a while, again. These things happen. I'm a busy college student. If I look dead, it's because I've been on tour with my college's play, so we're thriving. But it's been great, and even better, Lockwood & Co., the TV show, has come out on Netflix. I have been waiting for this for 2 years. I have made multiple videos about it, and I'm so excited that I finally get to just see it and talk about it. I did mention I was on tour, but I was able to watch the first episode the day it came out. And I have a few thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts, actually. I do want to preface this by saying I loved the show. I really, really, really do. I like it a lot. I think that the stuff they did with the shooting style, the editing style, I thought that was all brilliant. It's funny. It's just spooky enough. I thought the effects were great. But today, I'm just going to do a comparison of what changed from the book to the TV show. So the TV show only covers the first and second books of Lockwood & Co., which are The Screaming Staircase and The Whispering Skull. Again, very similar story. We're following Lucy as she joins Lockwood & Co. as they go on adventures. The first book is about them defeating Fairfax, and then the second book is about them finding the bone glass. So those two things stay the same. There's 8 episodes, but there are a few notable differences. Firstly, if you've only watched the TV show, you probably don't know Nori does not exist in the books. Lucy starts working for Jacob at the age of 8. She really quickly advances through the programs, hitting level 3 at age 11. She continues working for Jacobs until she turns 14, and there is that incident where her entire team dies, but she doesn't have a best friend like Nori to guide her through that. Nori just doesn't exist. Which brings me to my second point. I am not the biggest fan of how this show portrays Ghost Lock. Ghost Lock exists in the books, but it's not nearly as drastic as it's shown in the TV show. In the TV show, it sort of shows all these people falling into a coma, sort of, where their eyes are all white and glazed over, and they are completely unresponsive to anything of the outside world. How this is different, in the books, Lucy gets Ghost Locked a couple of times, if I remember correctly. The one that's most distinct in my mind is when they are fighting the ghost in the circus, you know? Yeah, I don't remember exactly what they called that one. But the female ghost comes up to her and she's sort of ghost locked. And George comes up behind her and is like, Lou, snap out of it. And she does. Because the purpose of ghost lock was just that the ghost has like specifically pushed all of its energy on you and you were unguarded. And therefore it can take advantage of that and kill you. So in the TV show, they treat it a lot more like it's a state of being where you can go into this like coma-like state and be unable to wake up. I'm not extremely bothered by this. I actually think Nori is an interesting character. The one concern I do have is the fact that since Nori doesn't exist in the other books, I don't know how they're going to bring her back to be relevant again. It sort of seems like she was just a one-off that motivated Lucy to come to London, when you could have found a motivation to get Lucy to come to London without Nori at all. And now it sort of feels like they're gonna have to find some closure with Nori, and I don't know where they're gonna find that. Moving on to the characters, Joe Cornish did say that he aged up Lucy, Lockwood, and George a little bit. Lucy is 16 in the TV show, whereas the book she starts out as 14, becomes 15, and I think by the end of it she's 16. But instead she's starting out as 16, and I think the boys are also 16, if not 17. I think this was a smart choice. I actually mentioned this in my first video. I'm interested to see whether or not they're going to stick to the normal ages, if they are going to get a 14-year-old actress to play Lucy and 15-year-old actors to play George and Lockwood. Maybe they'll make them slightly older. We can't know. I thought that they would age them up just a little bit because it's difficult to cast children in shows, but I'm okay with that. Honestly, I think it has the same effect, and Cameron, Ali, and Ruby are all right on the cusp of that. They're all in their very early 20s. And so I thought that worked. I thought it was fine. Now to the characters themselves. I do remember watching the first episode and feeling that the actors were a little flat. And that's probably my own issue. Continuing in the series, I thought they got a lot better and it was a lot more friendship and it was a lot more cohesive and present. Their stage presence got a lot more palpable and I thought that was very good. But, and this might be a little bit controversial, seeing these people act as these characters has been great. I think they were the best decisions they could have made. I think Cameron Chapman is a very, very good Lockwood. I think Ruby is a very convincing Lucy. And while George has a lot more changes done to him than he was in the books, I think honestly, he was the most on the nose. Let me explain. Lockwood in the books is very confident. He is cocky. He is very chivalrous and gentlemanly, but he is, he's a bit much sometimes. He cares about the company because it's his house, it's his legacy, he's doing this for his family. So he cares deeply about the company. But I think what they got wrong in the TV show is that that's his only priority. And that's simply not the case. He's had a friendship with George for over a year now. The company has actually been running for longer than it was in the TV show. The company actually, the reason they needed to hire Lucy was because they lost one of their members. And so actually they've existed for a good long while. And Lockwood and George are very close friends. Lucy, of course, joins. Lockwood immediately loves her. They're a very tight-knit group. They do have, they butt heads a lot because Lucy's a very blunt person. George is a very blunt person. But you immediately get that sense of teamness, oneness. And so the choice to make Lockwood as overconfident and as specifically caring about publicity and all these things just felt slightly off. It's not wrong. It just feels like a more intense version of what he was in the books. Lucy as well, I think, has been modified to be more palpable for TV viewers. In the books, she's a lot more headstrong, a lot more blunt. She's a lot more oblivious to some things. And in the movie, they definitely made her a little bit more palpable and likable than she was. I mean, she's very likable in the books, but it's hard to portray that in a visual format because you don't understand what the thought process is. And so I'm not mad about that, but she does feel a little bit different than she did in the books. However, George, personally, I think is the most on the nose, at least personality-wise. We know from the books, a very different character. His name is actually George Cubbins instead of George Kareem. He's a pasty, white, blonde, fat kid who wears a puffer vest all the time, does not care about personal hygiene, is very, very blunt, but is overall a genuinely caring and one of my favorite characters in the books. And I think Ali has really done that in a good way. Obviously, Ali looks nothing like George does in the books. That's not what I care about. I think he has done a really brilliant job of bringing the characteristics of George to life, but also making them his own. He's got the good sense of nerdiness, the good sense of headstrong and bluntness. He's funny still, which I think is very important. And I thought he did a really good job. In terms of those three characters, I think George is most on the nose personality-wise. One thing I noticed about the show that felt innately different from the books was Inspector Barnes. Inspector Barnes in the books is a very blunt, lawful kind of character, but I think in the movie they make it seem like he's going after Lockwood and Co., and that just wasn't the case in the books. In the books, he obviously was trying to uphold the law, and he was holding Lockwood and Co. accountable, but he wasn't, going after that. He wasn't trying to get them in trouble, you know what I mean? And in the TV show, it did feel a little bit like that. Like, he was specifically trying to get Lockwood and Co. in trouble, and that's just not true. He's still very likable. I don't think people watching it would hate him, which is good. He's a very important character later on, but my one concern is they're making him a little bit too intense now, and later he becomes a very important asset. We also have an interesting change with Kipps. In the books, Kipps was 23-ish, I think if I'm right, and he did not have a talent whatsoever when Lucy met him. But in the show, they portrayed him as someone who has talent and is slowly losing it, which I honestly think is very interesting. I'm not mad at that at all. I think that was a good choice. Which brings me to another part of this. We have a little bit of a romantic triangle, just slightly. Kipps in the books was never really romantically interested in Lucy. He was interested in getting her to join his team. He saw her as extremely powerful, extremely valuable, an asset, and he did try to get her on his team a few times, but there was never really a romantic undertone to that. In this, he outright asks to go on a coffee date with her, and she declines. This isn't something I mind because they also aged Kipps down and they aged Lucy up, so it's a little bit more middling and it's fine. I hope that doesn't turn into a triangle because that's not what we need with this show. which brings us to Lockwood and Lucy. How are they portrayed romantically? Because in the books, it's fairly obvious, I mean, even early on, that Lucy is attracted to Lockwood. She never explicitly says, oh my gosh, I have a crush on him, but she does describe him as handsome multiple times and just generally attractive. Lockwood, on the other hand, is pretty flirty, but it all goes over Lucy's head, which I think is brilliant, and I really hope they show a little bit more of that in coming seasons if they're made. Because with this, I'm happy with how they handled the romance in this. They have those little bits just to show the viewers, especially ones who haven't read the books, to show the viewers that there is a romantic connection there, but nothing has happened really. They haven't even gotten close to kissing, which I'm happy with. They had a little moment when Lockwood like helps her with her wrist and all that, but it wasn't like a, you know, in the movies when they get really close together and then they don't kiss. You know, it wasn't anything like that. They were like this, just looking at each other, and Lockwood looks away. So they had like a moment, and you can definitely get the romantic tension there, but it's not explicit, which is my favorite part. The one thing that I am kind of mad about, kind of frustrated, when Lucy goes to tell the boys that the skull has just talked to her, that she's pretty sure it's a type 3 ghost and that she just talked with it, they both immediately dismiss her. This is extremely different from the books, where Lucy was having self-doubts, and it was Lockwood and George who were encouraging her to experiment with it a little bit more. In this, Lockwood and Lucy have a fight, and it's not the kind of fight that fits their character. Lucy comes up the stairs and says, hey, this skull just talked to me, and he's like, bullcrap. She's like, no, it did. Then she gets all defensive and tries to prove that she really did talk with this type 3 by bringing up the bedroom that's a secret on the landing. Lockwood, of course, has a terrible reaction to this, which is fair and valid, but then she has the audacity to say that he is mad at her because he wants to be the main character, so to speak. He's mad that she may potentially steal his spotlight. I think this is totally out of character for both of them. First of all, Lucy does not want the spotlight, which is true in the show, but with this argument, it makes it more confusing about whether or not we're supposed to believe her. And then Lockwood, of course, reacts badly because she's insinuating that that's all he cares about. It's just a weird argument. It feels out of place. Even in the TV show. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel in character for them in the books or in the TV show. In the TV show, it caught me off guard. It just felt wrong. And I did not like that. Then, of course, you get one of the more obvious changes. The source for Annabelle Ward is a necklace in the books, but in the TV show, they made it a ring. This is not a big issue. It's totally fine. I'm just trying to point out all of the differences. The other thing with that, the rules when it came to Annabelle Ward's ring felt off. So in the books, when it's a necklace, Lucy goes behind Lockwood and George's back and takes the necklace out at night, puts it in a circle of iron, and tries to communicate with her. Then she gets in trouble with Lockwood, and it's a thing. In the TV show, they changed that a little bit, where Lockwood and George are in on it, and she's just sitting in a chair holding the ring. I understand they wanted to combine a little bit more of her touch and sight powers with that, but the way they portrayed her connection with Annabelle Ward was interesting. I understand that you need some visual indicator of what she's going through and this connection that she has, but they made it way more intense than it was in the books. Like, Lucy never gets in a tub fully clothed trying to drown herself. She also never speaks on behalf of Annabelle Ward like she's possessed. One of the things that this TV show is doing very well, that I think a lot of people might have issue with, is that they're adding drama to the plot per episode to make that episode a little bit more interesting. I think that's incredibly important. I think I actually mentioned this in my first video that I did on Lockwood & Co. They are going to have to add something into this TV show to make every episode interesting. That's going to be a struggle, and I anticipate that there will be new things added into the TV show that weren't in the books, or they're going to have to play up certain plot points and that kind of thing. It's a smart decision, because the way that they're doing it, it doesn't really change the plot, it just elevates it just a little bit so that each episode gets a little bit more intense just in that specific episode. One of the changes like this is that while Lucy is hired and Lockwood does know that she's only a third year, Inspector Barnes never really finds out about that, and there isn't nearly as much drama with her being hired illegally as there is in the TV show. But it worked perfectly, right? We're already having this pressure from DPRAC about the money that Lockwood owes to Mrs. Hope. By adding that little bit of Lucy maybe getting trouble, maybe getting arrested, maybe being blacklisted from being an agent, I think is a perfect way to elevate the tension without changing the plot too much. We also have a very minor change with Esmeralda and Joe In the books, the way that they would rapier practice was with these two straw dummies hanging from the ceiling in the basement, named Joe and Esmeralda. In the show, they changed this to a gadget that George has made that shoots like smoke down to simulate ghosts. I think that's a brilliant change. I was wondering how they were going to do that. I think it's shown a lot in media that people would sword fight against straw dummies when that just isn't practical, because every time you slice it, you have to sew it again, and it just doesn't work out. And so visually, I think doing the smoke machine was a very smart and interesting decision. One thing about the screaming staircase when they're in Combe Hall, something that I thought they could do improve that. In the book, it's called the screaming staircase because so many people died on it and because of the satanic monks. And when they get down there near the well, it's screaming. Their ears are bleeding and they can't focus and they're writhing on the ground with their hands over their ears. It's just a lot more intense of a scene than it was in the TV show. I think that was a missed opportunity. I think it worked. It did what it needed to, but it didn't really convince me a ton about why Lucy was trying to jump into the well. Which brings up my other thing. I think they made Lucy a little bit too scared. One of the things about Lucy is that she treats this as a career. She isn't scared of it. She genuinely wants it. She's extremely professional. Her thought processes while she's in a haunted house are very thoughtful and extremely professional. Again, she's the one who's always saying never falter on the steps of a haunted house. And I think just something that they did to make her a little bit more interesting and also have us viewers be more into the story is that she's a little bit more scared than she was in the books. In the books, she had fear. She's not an idiot, but she was extremely professional about it, and we see her control her emotions multiple times. And so I think just with this TV show, they've made her just a little bit more scared of the things going on than she was in the books. Again, that's not like a specific thing that bothers me. It is a little bit off. I don't like it as much as I liked how she was in the books, but I don't mind it, and it's fine. Then we move on. As a lot of you pointed out in my last video when I talked about the cast being announced, it was announced early on that there was this character named the Golden Blade, and I could not find anything about that because that character just does not exist in the books. A lot of you commented that, oh, it's probably Sir Rupert. And you were right. That is what this character is embodying. So they haven't given the Golden Blade his name, which is Rupert Gale. They are calling him the Golden Blade, which I think is cool. I'm okay with that. But that mystery is solved now, so we're all good. Another thing that changed is when Lucy and Lockwood go and visit the Winkmans for the first time. In the books, they disguise themselves and dress as tourists and just poke around a little bit until they're shoved out. In the TV show, they have them break in at night, get in trouble. Lockwood gets tied up. He's about to sacrifice his life for Lucy's, and then they get out by dumping kerosene all over the place. With that change, also, they've changed Leopold a lot, the son of Julius Winkman. They're showing Leopold as abused by his parents, when in the books, I don't think that was ever expressly stated, and I think Leopold took over his father's business when Julius gets arrested. So we'll see how that plays out, because long term that doesn't work as well as it does in the book. It's not that important of a detail, but it is different. Another change that they made is that they made Joplin a woman, which is different than in the books. He was a man, he was a little creepy and dandruff and all this stuff, but it wasn't dandruff. And the relationship between him and George was very purely academic. In the TV show, I don't want to say that they insinuated a romance, because I don't think that's quite right. They did insinuate a certain predatory type of emotion when it came to Joplin. George trusted her very quickly, and we know that George was affected by the bone glass. That's pretty accurate to the books, and I thought the way they portrayed that was really good. But they did have Joplin portray a little bit more of a predatory type of interest in George. And I don't specifically mean like sexual or anyway. I just mean that she had this power of authority over him, and he's just a kid. He's like 16 and she's something older than that. And so that felt a little bit weird. It's understandable, especially when you're trying to show that power dynamic. So I don't think it was a bad choice, but it was a different choice. And now we reach the most major change from the books. In the last episode, Joplin has kidnapped George and Kipps and is trying to make at least one of them look into the bone mirror. Lucy comes down, and this is all different right here. She sacrifices herself for George because she's like, George can't see much, but I I can talk to type 3s, and so I should be the one to look into it. Whereas in the books, George does, but he's not wearing his glasses, or his glasses are broken or something, and so he never actually sees inside it. But instead, Lucy takes up his place, stands there voluntarily, and then when Joplin takes the handkerchief off, Lucy turns and raises the skull in the way, and the school talks about it. This is the biggest deviation from the script so far. They bring up this idea that the skull is looking into the bone mirror and it's wrong. It's not how it should be.
This isn't right! Something stinks! It's wrong! It's absolutely wrong! It's not the eternal! It's a trap! We have to destroy it!
And Lucy passes out, but is still holding on to the skull, and the skull is still there. It's just weird. And the implication here is that, well, that's the thing. I don't know what the implication there is. Because in the books, the skull is the thing that's trying to get her to understand that life is in death and death is in life. That's what this bone mirror was trying to connect. And the fact that the skull looks inside of it and feels that it's wrong, I don't know what that means, but it deviates from the plot of the book a lot. I can't say whether or not that's good or bad. It is different, and it does make me wonder what they're planning for in the future, which is a good thing, right? I would like to wonder about it. That means they've done a good job. But it does imply something that just isn't present in the books. We're also being introduced to Flo and George's relationship a lot quicker than we were in the books. In the books, it took a while for us to realize that George kind of had a thing for Flo. But in this, they kind of make it, I mean, it's right in front of your face, which I kind of like. I think George does need that little bit of pick-me-up after being possessed and all that. So I'm excited to see how that goes. I'm not mad at it. I'm just interested, and it's different than the books. And then, of course, the infiltration of the Winkman auction is a lot different than it was in the books as well. It's far less planned out than we saw in the books, and they add this character who's an undercover DPRAC agent who gets killed in the fight. He sacrifices himself for these two kids, and it kind of snaps Lockwood out of, I am invincible, I can do anything kind of thing. I think that's extremely important, especially since they've set up how cocky he is. And so I hope that that death is not just for shock value, it's to help Lockwood overcome this character flaw that he has. So I think that was a smart decision. I think it was sad. It did take me off guard. It did shock me, which I think is good, especially as somebody who's read the books as many times as I have. I was still interested in the show for what it was, even if I already know what's behind the door and all of that. All in all, I think it's good. I think it's really good. I think it's good for people who are watching it for the first time. I think it's good for people who have read the book so many times and they're just excited to see it on a screen. I'm very happy to say that it's #1 in the UK and #3 in the United States, so I think it's performing very, very well. We can only hope that it performs well enough that it will be renewed for a new season. And all I can say is I really like it. I think they did a really good job of translating the text to visual format, which is a difficult thing to do with a fandom who's already so invested. So the 3 biggest compliments I would give this TV show, it's very good at upping the ante and adding plot points without changing the plot too much. It's very good about portraying the relationships in a way that is visually understandable and also subtle. And I think the balance between humor, spook, and other things is very, very good. And so I would recommend this to anybody. People who haven't read the books, people who've read the books 20 times, people who have read the books once, people who don't like scary things, people who do like scary things. I think it's a very versatile and well done show. I would highly recommend everybody to watch it. I would also highly recommend having not watched this video, so cut that out, I guess. And yeah, all in all, I think it was very well done. I think Joe Cornish really, really cares about the original material. I think he understands what we as a fandom are looking for. I think he also understands how to add new things without corrupting the story. I think what he has done is very good, very balanced, and I loved it. So I'm very excited to see season 2. Hopefully we get an announcement for whether or not that's been greenlit and when potentially it'll come out. My guess is 2 more years, but you never know. So that is my very thorough, nitpicky review of Lockwood & Co. I'm very happy to say I really do love it. Even with all the changes, even with the things I don't like so much, I think it's a very well done show. I think they translated it visually very, very well. If you want to know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about translating things to a visual format, you should see my first video, which I've linked a couple other times in this already. Thank you for joining me. These videos always seem to get more success than any of my other YouTube videos, so I'll probably just continue talking about Lockwood & Co., which I'm alright with. Yeah, that's it. funny? What's funny? What is humor? Yeah, that's enough funny, stupid stuff.